Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
To Plain Talk, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know about you, but I am sure happy that it's starting to look like spring out there. It's always that fun time of year when it gets to be like 6 o'clock at night and you realize, hey, it's still kind of light outside. Or you wake up in the morning and, hey, the sun's coming up. I'm not, in the middle of winter, you've been sitting at your desk for a couple hours before the sun comes up. And boy, it's already gone down before you go home from work. So, hey, it's nice. Things are getting better, but the legislature's still in session. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not that's a good thing. There's that old saying about life, liberty, and property being in jeopardy when the legislature's in session. I don't know. No, I'm being far too cynical. Anyway, one of the big topics that we've been talking about before the legislature, now at the legislature, is what to do about childcare in North Dakota. Now, many advocates, up to and including Governor Burgum, have talked about how important this is because we have a workforce shortage, right? We're trying to find people to go to work. Well, it's tough to go to work if you can't find anybody to take care of your kids, right? It's tough to pursue a career. It's tough to go out there and work a job if you got to take kids back and forth to school. You got, all those things, right? If you don't have childcare, you can't go to work. It's holding us back. And the cost, if you can find childcare, is prohibitive. And one aspect of that, right, is how do we hire childcare workers, right? Because if we have a workforce shortage, they're facing the shortage as anyone else. Well, my guest, Robin Nelson, who is the chief executive officer, I should say, of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Red River Valley. They're in the childcare game. That's part of what they do. Her organization has been speaking out, talking about how difficult it is to hire childcare workers, and not necessarily the finding them part, although that's difficult, but going through the process of getting them essentially licensed to work from the state. Robin, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity, Rob.
Describe the problem for us.
Well, let me open by saying childcare providers are not interested in loosening any restrictions or quality or regulations, and we're in no way advocating for that. And there are a lot of great people that want to do the right things for the childcare industry, from the frontline staff all the way up to the governor. So everybody is well intended. You mentioned there's a workforce shortage. I'm going to recycle a quote that I've used a lot lately. Childcare is the business that keeps other businesses in business. We have applicants, Rob, that we are unable to hire for a variety of reasons. And we've really identified some gaps in the system at the state level and some lack of communication that are really preventing us unnecessarily from hiring people.
So let's...
Robin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Well, Robin, I wanted to get you to describe a few of those hurdles that stop you from hiring folks. And then I wanted to jump in on a couple of the Senate bills that represent both the governor's proposal and some other legislators' proposals directly addressing childcare, because I know you've been tracking those closely. So could you describe those things could you give a top 3 things that prevent people from being hired?
Sure. We have a brand new licensing portal from the state. We are required to upload licensing documents. That was just rolled out, and the system continues to crash. And we're not the only ones. Once we get things uploaded after about the umpteenth time, our licensors aren't able to view what we've uploaded. And so we are receiving late fees because we're missing deadlines. And so I think that this was rolled out without piloting it properly. The training was not adequate. And so that is slowing down what we're trying to do just to get the licenses that are going to expire renewed. As far as hiring people, background checks continue to be an issue. I have been working on this. I went on a statewide campaign 4 years ago. We have seen some improvement. But we are seeing some major backlogs and some misunderstandings through the state. For example, we need to log fingerprints and then have our applicants be checked in-state records and then out-of-state records. Oftentimes, it's about 2 to 3 weeks to be able to make an appointment for the fingerprints. And then we need to send the forms overnight to Bismarck. We are finding that they are sitting in a pile because we know that there are date stamps. We've had employees at that state office say we're 11 days behind to even opening these before they can start the process. But however, the response from somebody that reports to DHS is saying publicly, our processing time is 2 to 3 days. So we're seeing a major disconnect there.
So hang on, you're saying you're trying to hire somebody, they are qualified for the job. Presumably they could pass a background check. Let's give this hypothetical person that benefit of the doubt. And their background check is going to take over a month before they can even start to be employed.
Yep. And so it's way easier for them just to go somewhere else. We've tried to do some onboarding and training, but they want their end job. And so it's a turnoff for them. And we've lost several because of that frustration. We have somebody that tracks. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, Robin, what is the total timeline? Because you threw out some numbers like 2 to 3 weeks to make an appointment to get a fingerprint, and then you turn those fingerprints in. There's delays. They're talking about 11 days before they can even open them. I suppose after they open them, there's a time. What is that timeline right now from, you've done the interviews, you read the resumes, and you say, okay, we want to hire this person, we want to onboard them. What is the timeline until you could say, okay, you're licensed, you can go to work? What is that for your organization? What is that typically?
On average, 4 to 6 weeks. And we track every single one of them.
Okay.
And let me put this in more crass terms so Robin doesn't have to. If you're looking to work, you're willing to work, you can go get a job at Buffalo Wild Wings or Sicky's Garage here in Fargo and get paid $17, $18, maybe $20 an hour sometimes before you get to tip. Or you can wait 4 to 6 weeks to do this work. And Robin, can they compete with the wages?
No, we can't pay that much because if we did, we would be passing that cost along to our families. So we're kind of in a predicament here. But the frustration, guys, is at the state level, they don't think it's an issue. And so we are pulling our hair out here saying, no, this is an issue. And several of our concerns continue to be downplayed. And hence the reason, out of frustration, several of us held a press conference last Friday because we just aren't being taken seriously.
It's kind of remarkable that that's the case when you look at the cast of Republican political leaders, Democratic political leaders. I mean, the governor himself, former Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford, I know before he left office was very involved. I mean, the cast of political figures that are out there saying childcare is a crisis, childcare is a major problem, and now here you're telling me that state officials are saying they don't view this as an issue, that it takes 6 weeks to hire somebody from what is, frankly, and I do not mean this in a demeaning way at all to childcare providers, but is in a lot of ways an entry-level job. I mean, unfortunately, and we can have a discussion about if they should be paid more. I think they should. I don't know. I mean, the problem, of course, is where does the money come from? But to Ben's point, we're not hiring university presidents here, right? I mean, we're not hiring doctors. I mean, we're hiring people who are not going to make a lot of money, who probably can't afford to wait 6 weeks to start their job. So
I could not agree more. But I think what's happening
what's the
Sanford
disconnect?
Group they are looking at a higher level. How can we help create more spots? But we are still having internal systemic issues that until they're fixed, we are not going to be able to build these buildings they want to build. And I sent you guys a study that interviews several childcare providers and also business people, and then legislators and administrative staff at the staff level. There's a complete disconnect between what the providers say they need and what the other groups think is needed. And so we're here raising the white flag going, no, we need some systems fixed before it fails itself.
You would think this would make a lot of political sense to be a watchdog for constituents, many of whom have listed this as a top issue for them. Affordable childcare, both as employers and employees across the state, rural and urban areas in North Dakota. So, Robin, let's specify where the two problems that you identified here. They are among others. Where are they coming from? Who administers these background checks, and who put out the website that you're mandated to run these applications through?
Well, first of all, let me say our legislators and governor's office have been extremely helpful. And we've worked with them on some of the bills that have been proposed. But there's only so much they can do. Mm-hmm. They don't make administrative policy. So we really feel there is some communication and accountability issues within the North Dakota's early child care division that is under the umbrella of Department of Health and Human Services. Now, again, we're not blaming anybody, but we're also not being taken seriously. And there's a lack of communication within that department as well. And really, when I was watching legislative testimony, then there was a lack of urgency from the agency personnel for any of the things that we're talking about right now. And that really frustrated a lot of people.
That's still amazing to me because, I mean, you're talking about they're under the umbrella of a state agency that is headed up by a cabinet level position whose boss is Governor Doug Burgum, whose budget is made by a lot of the lawmakers who are talking about what a crisis healthcare is. And it's just kind of remarkable to me as a Republican, and I'm not necessarily to bring ideology into this, but as a Republican and a conservative, this is a layup, right? Like this is exactly what we talk about all the time. Government bureaucracy slowing down the private sector that is trying to provide people with the goods and services that they need. This is a layup. How is this problem lingering out there with no sense of urgency? When you say that, and to be fair, I watched the committee testimony. I agree with your assessment. I don't sense that there is the sense of urgency to solve this problem. And I guess I'm just, and this is not a fair question to you, Robin, because your answer is going to be, I don't know. But how is this still a lingering problem? This seems like a layup.
Well, I would agree, but I think this is a big system. There are a lot of cogs in it. And we need to start at that level before we can really make some systemic change within the industry.
What do you
another reason?
Go ahead.
Another reason we are unable to hire, and we've had to fire actually, is there is a new administrative rule that came down in January of 2022 that we can no longer employ people that are on probation, even if it's not a barrier crime. And there's a list of barrier crimes in the state of North Dakota. And of course, we wouldn't want to hire a child abuser or a violent person, but I have turned away 4 people that have minor in consumption because we will hire primarily college students for out of school programming. We had to turn away 3 applicants because they're on probation for a minor in consumption. And we had to fire a current employee because she is on probation, and her full-time job is she's a paraprofessional in Fargo Public Schools. So she cannot walk down the hall to serve our children that she served during the day. So we had to fire her. So the point is, what I'm saying here is there are some different interpretations. We're hearing from some at the state level that no, she should just be able to explain and provide proof this is a non-barrier crime. And we have others that license us say, no, they're not eligible for hire. And we can't get a straight answer. We know it's not a federal law. So this is coming through the state, at least we assume it is, but we just can't get any information or clarity. And this again goes back to, we ask questions, but we get inconsistent answers. So for losing 4 employees equates to me with a 1-to-20 ratio of 80 kids that don't have care.
And trying to navigate that local versus state level bureaucracy while trying to run a business, while trying to get the kids on time, while making sure everybody gets fed everything else is not something that a small to medium level employer should be having to keep track of. Let's be clear here, Robin, when you say minor in consumption, you're talking sometime under the age of 21, someone was at a party and got caught with, there was a bottle of Jameson in the background, they had a Bud Light in their hands, and they were 19 years old. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so you are a person that has you have lobbied the legislature before, I would say effectively. You know what the needs are here. What would you say to listeners, to folks at home who are concerned about this issue, as many are in the state of North Dakota right now? What's the most effective way for them to express themselves while this legislative session is happening? A lot of times we hear, talk to your legislators, reach out, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but is there a specific prescriptive formula that people can use to express themselves, express the frustrations that you're talking about on this issue, to educate people?
Well, the only people that are accountable to constituents are legislators. The state employees technically answer to, the governor, if you will, ultimately. I think our legislators do have some influence, more so than a small in-home childcare provider calling the Department of Human Services chair. So I think the best thing to do is contact your local legislators within your district and say, I'm hearing some concerns here, and how can you help us? Legislators will answer emails and are more likely to answer them if you live within their district. Yeah. You're well aware of that, Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good for everyone to hear, though.
Well, it is. I think people sometimes think that the those names that they read in the newspaper or see in television broadcasts, that they're unreachable. I will say North Dakotans are very, very lucky. Our lawmakers are very responsive. I have called the cell phone listed on the legislative biography and spoke to a lawmaker who was out in the middle of his field, farming. This wasn't during session, obviously. So I mean, you can reach them. You can get a hold of them. It's not that hard, and obviously do so respectfully and all that jazz. But Robin, am I correct? I mean, it seems like we have, and I've worried about this for a while, that one of the impediments to it's not the silver bullet that fixes the problem, but one of the impediments to the childcare problem is that in some ways it's a little bit overregulated. And I'm wondering, I mean, are there laws that need to change here, or is this just an administrative problem, or is it both?
I don't think it's overregulated. So I'll kind of push back on that a little bit. I think the regulations are fine. I think the inconsistent interpretation and application of some of those regulations are what are frustrating. We can receive a violation order from one licensor in town, and in the same office, another person would say, no, that's not a violation. So I think it comes back down to communication. Oftentimes when new programs roll out from the state level, we hear about them in the media, or we start to hear bits and pieces as we contact the state. My buddy Lori Temke at the Y, we get together and say, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? And we try to put it all together on the back end. So we're not getting the communication down on a lot of these initiatives either. So is the onus upon us as childcare providers to do that? Now, we're really fortunate because we run larger organizations. And as you guys know, I have some background in working through some of these state systems. A lot of these smaller providers just don't, and they don't have the time because they need to be working with their children, because they need to be in ratio. So we're trying to advocate not only for large providers, but also those in-home providers and group providers, because they simply, just don't have the background that some of us do.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because if you have, an organization like yours has some resources to have staff and to be able to do the work to comply. A lot of times the smaller ones don't, and I think they do their best. But I'll be frank with you, Robin. I know a lot of people that take their children to unlicensed care providers, and I'm not trying to out anybody. I'm just saying there's a reason why that's happening, and I think some of it is really, really difficult to comply with all of this stuff right now. I'm not condoning that. I'm just saying that's the world we're living in right now.
That's right. And what we're hearing from some providers, and this is just hearsay, but they're like, forget it. I can't follow the rule. Find me. Shut me down. We just cannot make this happen. Here's another instance of miscommunication. Typically, new administrative rules are rolled out in January. We were notified on January 10th that we must have immunization records on file for all of our school-age children. but they were due January 1st. So we are scrambling together 787 families' documents and trying to upload them into a broken portal. So we're asking for, can we just have like a 90-day implementation? When we looked into it and complained about why are we learning about these things after they're due, we were told the department's policy is to not provide any information until the rule is finalized. And that same respondent said she has been asking to create newsletters to roll some of this out, and leadership won't let her. So what's going on? Why are these don't need to be secrets? I mean, they're there to support us. So we just are so confused if we're not aware of what we are being held accountable to, and then our licenses aren't being renewed. I mean, we're at our wit's end. I mean, we're just stuck.
Robin, that's really obviously unfortunate to hear. Robin, I did want to get into some of the legislation that's being kicked around right now that I'm sure you've been keeping good track of. One of them is Senate Bill 2012, which it's always funny when us legislative folks talk about those bill numbers as if that's going to like ping in people's minds. But that's the Department of Health and Human Services budget that has has child care proposals totaling up to $73 million that had a public hearing on Monday. Can you speak to those proposals, and if you find any of those to be helpful to the goals of the Child Care Coalition that you've been part of or interacted with have?
Sure. I did watch the testimony on that. It was in Senate Appropriations. Really, the two key things there are it's basic operational dollars, but they are asking for an additional 1.5 FTE to help process some of this. However, a legislator I talked to said they're having trouble staffing their existing positions, so it seems odd to be asking for an additional 1.5 FTE. They are also asking for, and I wish they would have done this before, $1 million to digitize the fingerprint system in the state of North Dakota.
There we go.
And so that was a big ask. And we are supporting them in that. And we are reaching out to legislators to say this needs to happen, and shame on us that it didn't happen before.
Yeah, that makes sense. The other one was Senate Bill not 2020, Senate Bill 2301, that has a child care stabilization grant program. Now that got a do pass recommendation from the Senate Workforce Development Committee. That's a pretty big deal. Now I assume you've been tracking that.
That is the most important bill in a suite of bills that have been written primarily by Fargo Democrats. Here's my theory. There are a lot of proposals out there for help with buildings and other pieces there, but if you have buildings and if you don't have people to fill them, then they don't do any good. It's starting from the back end. There are also bills out there that are helping subsidize families to pay for this expensive childcare. Those are great, but to get to the root of the problem, if we can keep the cost down, we wouldn't have to pay and subsidize the families if the costs were kept down. So essentially, this what you're referring to is a child care stabilization grant. Mm-hmm. This would give us dollars per child that attends to help us pay our staff without passing that cost along to our families. Now we are coming off some similar grants from COVID that worked for us. They gave us those dollars for staff. It allowed me to raise our hourly wages from top to bottom, $3 an hour. And we have not passed that cost along to our families. Those COVID dollars are about to expire. And so that's why we feel the 2301 was written as kind of feathering off point from the expiring grant. So to me, that is the root of what probably the most important bill out of that suite of bills.
No, I just wanted to add, you did mention that it was written mostly by Fargo Democrats, and it is prime sponsored by Senator Braunberger, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He's a freshman senator from the newly created District 10 in Cass County, representing Southwest Fargo. But I did also want to mention in the Senate, he does have Senator Sean Cleary, Republican of Bismarck, and Senator Kurt Kroon, a longtime serving Republican of Grand Forks, on his bill as well. So do you think it has a pretty decent chance of passing in the Senate?
I sure hope so. Kurt Kroon used to run child cares up in Grand Forks, I was told. So he gets the system. So we're fortunate to have him on those bills. So and And I've contacted all of them in support of these bills, and I've testified virtually on them. So it's we just need, as you know, Ben, there's only so many dollars to go around, and I'm kind of tired of hearing about how much money North Dakota has, but there's only so many dollars to go around, and legislators are lobbied on a very regular basis on how much everybody needs for every program. So really it comes down to a matter of priorities. And I really do hope that this rises to the level of childcare finally getting some help, because we're drowning out here. It's only, in my opinion, getting the attention it is now, because now it's finally being recognized as a workforce issue.
Well,
and so that finally gets some people to sit up a little straighter.
Yeah, I listen. I've had I spaced my kids out. I had one every 7 years, so I have been paying for childcare costs for 2 decades, and looking forward to not having to pay for it anymore in the future. But this is trust me, for personal experience, I understand the scope of the problem. It is expensive, it is difficult, and I mean even the workforce issue. I mean, it kept my wife out of the workforce for a while, so. It's tough all the way around. It's an important issue. Robin, thank you so much for your time coming on and talking about it today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day, guys.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Kuhl, host of the Northland Outdoors podcast. Hey, here in the Northland, we love our time outside. And on the Northland Outdoors podcast, we're going to talk about all of it. Not just fishing, not just hunting, but mountain biking, camping, rock climbing, bird watching, you name it. We're going to have it on the Northland Outdoors podcast. New episodes every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So look for it and join us on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
Well, that just finished up with Robin Nelson. I think that was a very illuminating. To me, that's always the most helpful. It's one thing when political leaders and everything talk about this stuff, but it's nice to talk to somebody who's just doing it. I mean, Robin Nelson is involved in providing childcare. I mean, she's doing it. She's the, her and her employees have to comply with the law. I mean, they're doing it. And to me, those are the most helpful people to talk to. And it sure sounds like she's frustrated, which again, I don't understand the disconnect. Like, everybody's saying this is a major problem, right? Almost everybody. But enough of like the important big names in state politics are saying, so how can some of the disconnect that she's talking about among our state, the administrators and the bureaucrats who are in charge of this stuff, how can that disconnect exist? Why doesn't somebody from the governor's office go down there and say, hey, let's get going?
Well, she was saying that, and I completely agree with her, that the reason this is getting this attention now, as you're saying, and because it's been an issue for more than just this session, frankly, is because it's now being looked at as a workforce issue. And while that is correct, I would find it completely inexcusable given the amount of time that leaders and majority party leaders and the governor now have given to this issue. If they didn't do anything about it, or if they passed a bill that had been gutted and becomes a solution in name only that doesn't have any teeth in it. Yeah, and let's be frank about what teeth is. Teeth's going to be money. It's going to be money, taxpayer dollars. Maybe it's because I'm not on those legislative chairs anymore that I get to yell and scream that to the heavens. But I know it doesn't play in Bismarck, but that's what it takes.
Well, the governor doesn't need the legislature to do anything. To go down the hall, or send one of his people, send his chief of staff or something down the hall, or send his lieutenant governor down the hall and say, hey, send out a newsletter. Hey, don't make them comply. Give them enough time to comply with the rule. Like, she's talking about the vaccine thing, where they have to go from 700 families and get vaccine evidence, which I'm not against that. But all of a sudden they have to go out and do that, and they don't have enough time to, the parents are trying to get, you're a parent, like, you get a notification, I got to track down the vaccine records. They go to the hospital can't turn it around, and now they're out of compliance, and now people are facing, how do you not just send somebody down the hall and say, hey, give them more time. Send out a newsletter. Let people know. They don't need the legislature to do anything. And I don't even think they need to spend any more money. They have all the resources they need to do that kind of stuff. They just need to do it.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. I'll actually take it a step further because, one, it's a political layout, right? It's a consumer good government watchdog layup press conference or whatever, and it's just the right thing to do. On top of that, Robin mentioned the website for verifying employees there, and it is apparently breaking down on not just her, but for
Yeah.
families.
Our governor has some
employers
experience with the tech industry. Again, might be a nice layup for him. Fix the website.
I mean, and this becomes a joke that's not a joke anymore. And we've had this happen on a federal level where we get congressional members who ask, the famous, how does Facebook make any money? And Mark Zuckerberg answering, we run ads, and that being evidence as an example of how far behind Congress is. But the thing is, elected officials not being up on their technology and folks working in departments like Department of Health and Human Services, it's not a joke anymore that you don't know how technology works. And to this point, with a government website rollout, I think there should be a mandate of some sort for a blind tested website to run for a solid month without interaction from the public. Yes, it takes having that website up and running for a month. It would absolutely be worth it before it is rolled out and mandated for an employer to use it to verify their employees through, because otherwise we get what we have here. And now we have piecemeal IT updates and patchwork improvements to it.
Or beta
That's the
test
kind of thing that slows anybody down to a halt.
Like if you're going to roll it out, like beta test it, say, hey, before we roll it out to everybody, hey, Boys and Girls Club of the Red River Valley, will you beta test this with us, and understanding that, there may be some headaches along the way, but will you help us test this so we can see and get your feedback? I mean,
have them do it without the mandate. But what I'm seeing more and more in the tech industry now, Rob, is to simply, when they do a systems shift of their CRM systems, their customer contact systems, they just run an entirely separate system blind side by side and watch for the errors. And it straight up costs, and this is admittedly bigger companies, it costs them more because they have to run the fully functioning website blind for a month, but it allows them to see every error there and allows them to take a step back and say, stop. This step 3, step 8, and step 13 of this 20-step process are going to blow up this whole thing. You need to go and correct those steps before we mandate everybody, all of our employees from using it.
Right.
Do it on the government level. If you're going to make employers do it in a system they don't even live in for a living, no, unacceptable.
No, it's unacceptable. The private sector, the government can do this. Somebody needs to light a fire under them. So anyway, hopefully,
it takes and I would say you mentioned before, there's a conservative ideology that says we're against bureaucracy or government tape. I would say the liberal ideology would say that you can't run a government if you don't believe in it, and that being a good government egghead gets you involved in this kind of.
There's plenty of room for bipartisanship. I mean, everybody
there definitely is.
Everybody wants the government to work, right? Like if. Most conservatives are not anarchists, right? So we recognize that the government. So I want my interactions with the government to be smooth. I don't want to spend a lot of my time dealing with that crap. I want to spend my time running my business.
It should be a one-step stop. It should be easier.
Right. So anyway, we've beat that. It's such an important issue, and it's such a practical one. I mean, this is a no-brainer.
I want to make one last point out real quick, which I know it's a thing that's said a lot, but when we said what's the most effective way of communicating to your legislators, this is happening in your district, and we said contact your legislators, I just want to say one more thing to your listeners. If you're getting involved with the political process, advocating for yourself to the legislature for the first time, that's a great thing to do. Please look up your individual legislators, and yes, try to focus on your local ones, and give, if you can, it's more work on your part, give local examples or nearby geographic examples of, hey, the daycare here, I experienced this, just so you know, as your constituent or someone who lives in North Dakota. And don't get too hung up on it. If you live in Fargo and you email a Fargo legislator about a Fargo daycare center and they're one district over from you, who cares? Yeah, they should be servicing you. They should be servicing the people. What I am saying though is there is an all legislator email. And in my time there were a lot of folks and a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of them out of state, some of them in state, that would give form letters to people. Very flowery, very legalese language, very clickbaity titles.
That doesn't work.
And they would send it to everybody. And people who didn't know how to write their legislator said, I don't know if I'm articulate enough. I don't know if I'm good enough at this. I'll just send this. Don't do that. The more a legislator can tell this is really coming from you, an individual example from your daily life, the more effective it is.
It's going to make it seem more authentic. Like not that you want to make mistakes or whatever, but if you don't sound like just another lobbyist or just another cookie cutter flack, they're going to take you more serious because you sound like a real voter and someone who's actually, that's who they, believe it or not, that's who they want to hear from.
And believe it or not, when I was a legislator, just so folks have a peek under the curtain here, the first constituent email I got had an email headline that said, "Protect my gun rights." And I thought, oh boy, here goes a big controversial issue. And I didn't know we had any gun bills up. And I read and I read and I read, and it was 5 paragraphs long. And I was like, how am I going to answer this guy? And it was all about, protect the Second Amendment. And I was like, I don't think this is about any bills we have up right now. And I was a freshman legislator, so I didn't know. I was trying to take it seriously. In the end, it's, John Smith, or whatever his name was, signed whomever, Nashville, Tennessee. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Huh? And then I was told, oh no, that's common. Literally every day you will get emails from people about national
activist groups will harvest legislative emails, and then they'll tell their members, hey, send a blast out to all these elected officials across the country. But that's not really how it works. When you're elected, you're going to represent your community, your legislative district.
Absolutely.
And that's who you want to hear from.
You got to go comb through 300 emails per day, literally,
right.
From form letters. So make sure yours stands out by being authentic, not by being slick. Just wanted everybody to hear that again.
All right, let's move on. I had a big story about a new freshman state rep from up in the northeast part of the state, who is Donna Henderson, Representative Donna Henderson. And Ben, I'm assuming you read my column about it.
Sure did.
And I will tell you, one thing I like about the podcast is sometimes I get to talk about like kind of the process that goes in to writing some of these pieces for me. And one thing that I did go back and forth on, and for those of you who are just maybe didn't see the column, it's about 3 members of Representative Henderson's family, 3 of her sons, who have married women who are from a tiny town. It has like 250 people in it, called Shell City, Missouri. And Shell City, Missouri is famous for having infamous maybe, for having what's called the Church of Israel, which is run by a man named Daniel Gaiman, who has run with and influenced some of the most violent and notorious bigots America's ever produced. We're talking about people like Eric Rudolph, who was responsible for the Olympic Park bombing at the Atlanta Olympics in the 90s. We're talking about Bo Gritz. We're talking about the founder of the Aryan Nations. I mean, to this
murderers.
Day,
people who have killed people,
horrible people,
very intentionally, bigots, and over their race, being racist.
And if you go to this,
there's no ambiguity.
And this guy's in his 80s or 90s. I think he was born in the 1930s, so however old that makes him. But he's still preaching to this day. And you could go to I went to this church's website and listened to sermons where he's railing against interracial marriage and, talking about whether or not, how the Jews stole, the real, I don't even know. It's crazy.
The
stuff.
Standard anti-Semitic.
Standard anti-Semitic. I mean,
other races.
You know it. You know the song and dance. Disgusting stuff. 3 of Representative Henderson's sons have married women who are from that city and in that church. The marriage licenses for one of them specifically said they were married in the church. If you go on her social media and go back to some of her campaign posts, the daughters of the founders, who are still in the church, are on there, talking about her campaign and giving her. There's obviously a family tie between Donna Henderson's family. And by the way, her husband, Paul Henderson, who's not currently a district chair, but in the past has been a district chair for the North Dakota Republican Party, has been a regional chair for the North Dakota Republican Party. There's clearly some family ties to this church. When I called Representative Henderson about them, she basically told me her private life's none of my business and hung up on me. And I will admit, Ben, I think that your responsibility for what your adult children do is limited, right? I think some of the stuff like people getting upset about,
I'd say very limited in many cases.
But the thing is when 3 of your children get married into what I would fairly describe as a racist cult, I think you have to ask a question. Like, did you go to the weddings? Do you agree with this? Like, I feel like this is something you have to speak out about it. Representative Henderson's not speaking out about it. And so I wrote the column about it, and some people are upset. Some of the criticism I've got, a lot of people are like, wow, and scared, and think it's a big deal, rightfully so. Some of the feedback I've gotten is this idea that somehow these adult children, like she's not responsible and it's guilt by association. And I At the very least, Ben, I think Representative Henderson owes the public an explanation about this.
I was initially torn when we were going to bring this up on the show because there's a big part of me that doesn't believe in people's personal lives being drug into, the political realm. But at the point where there are donations being made to your campaign, I think it is well worth asking and hearing.
Now, to be clear, there were no donations. There were no donations. I searched for donations. There were no donations.
I'm sorry. I thought two of the donations were from the daughters of
Well, no. What they were on Facebook because she was posting pictures of like her sons, putting up campaign signs, and so the founders' daughters are on there, like, To me, it was speaking to these people know each other.
Okay,
and they're friendly with each other.
Putting up campaign signs, it's not supporting. Listen, here's the deal. I thought about that, but then at the same time, I thought if I were, let's say, I'm running for dumb enough to run for office again. No, I'm running for office, and someone who is has known ties, social media ties, and is supportive of the Ku Klux Klan is putting up yard signs for me and donating to me. Someone's going to ask me very reasonably, what's your association with that? Do you believe in these principles? Are they going to govern what you do? Or take it from the left-wing side and say, if someone was, you found a donation to me, even for $25, although it doesn't have to be reported, so I guess over $200, and then you find that person has a Facebook post somewhere repeatedly calling on America to become a communist country because they really believe in Chairman Mao's philosophy. I think it's very fair to ask me at the least, hey, one, did you know about this? Oh, wow, it turns out as a family member, there's a lot of ties to you on social media too. So do you believe in this? Do you believe in communism? Do you believe that America should be this?
Yeah.
You're asking for votes to make laws. We want to know what you believe in. And for the idea that you couldn't just do the standard issue, I don't believe in anti-Semitism. I don't believe in, I'm anti-racist. You can't, she could have dismissed you with, I'm not racist. She could have just said that, and that she didn't bother me.
Even that, I don't know. Did she go to her son's wedding in this church? Has she sat in the congregation and listened to sermons against interracial marriage or some of these other crazy things that are preached by this church? Listen, the logo of the church literally has a Confederate flag in it.
It's not subtle.
It's not a subtle
just more than
thing.
anything.
Let me, because I think this is important. All the time, I hear about relatives, children of public officials, elected officials, who do things sometimes that aren't so great. Right? Maybe they have substance abuse problems. Maybe they've committed crime. This stuff happens, right? And you don't see a lot of that stuff get reported, not by me and not by other reporters, because for the most part, it's not relevant, right? It's not that. Unless somehow the lawmaker was involved, it's not really their fault, right? Like some people's children go up and they make mistakes, they do terrible things, and it's not really news. Right. We need to be aware because, obviously as somebody using their political influence to help out somebody and get a different sort of justice. Well, okay, then that's a problem and that's news. Right. But there is a line there that you don't want to cross. But for me, and the reason why I wrote that story is because I'm sorry, with all and listen, Representative Henderson's been on, she's been on sort of the fringes of this extremism that we're dealing with as a country. She was at the January 6th riot. Now, she didn't enter the building. There's no indication that she committed a crime, but she posted pictures of herself and her husband at the riot. She posted pictures, sort of trying to claim that the people who were entering the building were Antifa. In a lot of ways, she was sort of cheering them on. That's a thing that exists. I don't think it's unfair to ask when not one, not two, but three of your children marry into a church, into something like the Church of Israel, to say, Representative, what is going on? Do you believe in this? Are you a member of the church? We don't know.
I'd be very curious to see. I have not bothered to look it up if the representative has posted any of the many, many memes and things about Hunter Biden's laptop that, frankly, her political ideology tends to focus on. Maybe she hasn't. Maybe that's not fair. But I
think the Hunter Biden thing probably is not all of it is fair. Some of it's fair insofar as Hunter Biden was working, lobbying on behalf of interests. And his father was a senator and then the vice president and is now the president of the United States. Obviously, this all happened before he was president. But I mean, some of that stuff's fair to talk about. Some of that stuff's fair to report on.
The lobbying piece should be reported as an ethics piece, but
Sure.
Outside of that, I have a problem with the continual and even now I have a problem understanding where the influence is, what the controversy is currently in the White House. I mean, this goes back a long time, all the way back to, I remember Jimmy Carter's brother, I believe,
Billy Carter. Billy
Yeah.
Carter. Yep.
And there was a lot of heat put on Jimmy Carter for that. And it's like, why? His brother has I think he was an alcoholic, but it was like, what does this have to do? Did he start a war in Russia? No. George W. Bush's twin daughters were what? I think they were at a party in college, and they were
underage drinking, something like that.
They were 20 years old and were at a party that had alcohol in it. Who cares?
Yeah.
I'd leave it alone.
I mean, the amount of attention and it goes the other way too, where like Chelsea Clinton's coming out with a new book. Why do I care? What did she do? She was a former president's daughter. Great. I by the way, I would say the same thing about the royals. What do I care about Harry and Meghan Markle? Well, I don't care. We fought a war so we wouldn't have to care about the royal family anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't.
I couldn't care.
We get stupid about some of this stuff.
Buy the book, or you cannot, though. There you have the choice of, that's what she wants. She wants you to buy the book, and you're choosing not to. That's the
right,
the major consequence she has.
But to me, this was different. I think this is something you have to care about.
I agree.
And I hope at some point the representative comes out and speaks about this, because I don't think. Maybe it's painful for her. Maybe it's very difficult that 3 of her sons have done this. Maybe there's something there to be concerned about, but. At some point, she campaigned for this job. Her and her husband donated thousands of dollars to her campaign, right? She went out, she did the hard work, she got herself elected.
And they're GOP activists.
Right. And so that comes with scrutiny. If you want the spotlight, you get the spotlight.
And you want to be a district chair. Yeah. No, you do. And to your point about potentially this is painful for her, if it is, I can be sympathetic to that. I don't necessarily need to know church attendance or wedding attendance or all those things that are a part of it. But what I really want to know is, what's your stance on very specific, very troubling political issues that this church pushes very hard and has resulted in some of the most nefarious characters in contemporary American history, and violent acts on top of that.
Listen, if your family's associated with stuff like this, then I think you have to speak out about it if you're a public official. You just have to. That comes with the territory. And I mean, obviously people didn't know about that. I didn't know about this until I looked into it. So, I thought it was an important story. I'm glad it's out there. Obviously it's the usual. It was kind of amazing. I think one of the first comments I got on Facebook about it was with somebody was like, who cares? Why don't you write about the lawmakers who are associated with Black Lives Matter or Planned Parenthood? And I'm thinking to myself, whatever you think of those organizations, and you don't have to like them and you don't have to agree with them, I don't think you could put them in the same category as a racist church that is inspired so much. And by the Dan Gaiman church, Google it. I mean, there's articles from the Anti-Defamation League. I mean, these are not good people. And
I would go so far as to say, for that commenter and that general philosophy, go for it, because I'm guessing those legislators that have either donated or received donations from Planned Parenthood, or if they have some association or posted something about Black Lives Matter, ask them about their stances and what they think about the issues that those organizations touch, and I'm guessing they will talk to you about them. And that is a major difference here.
Well, it is a major difference. They'll talk about why they align with Planned Parenthood to whatever. I mean, obviously, we're talking about a hypothetical here.
Then don't vote for them if you don't like that. That's just fine. Don't vote for her.
Taking a donation from Planned Parenthood, that gets disclosed. That's happening out in the public. Or if you show up at a Planned Parenthood rally and you speak or something, it's happening out in the public. It's happening out in the light of day. We know about it. So, and again, I find the comparison offensive. And I say that as somebody who obviously ideologically does not align with Planned Parenthood. Or some of those other organizations, putting them in the same category as a racist church like this that has a long history of inspiring extremism. We'll put it that way. I don't think that's not a fair comparison. It's not fair at all. So, All right,
It's
let's put a pin in that discussion. Let's move on. You had a couple of bills that you wanted to talk about. House Bill
I
1383,
did.
House Bill 1382. I think one is an employer credit up to $3,000 for apprenticeships. The other one is a $500 scholarship to North Dakota students. What are these, Ben?
So for some reason, I keep trying to end the show on these positive notes. I don't know what it is with me, Rob. Maybe spring is just the impending spring has just got me in a good mood.
You keep hanging out with me, you're going to turn into another curmudgeon. That's yeah.
House Bill 1382 or 1383 rather has bipartisan support that gives employers up to $3,000 in income tax credits for completing apprenticeships for to-be employees, folks that they have not hired on, but have basically turning them into paid internships. And I think the goal here is to enable employers through a tax credit to be able to afford to pay interns to train them in and get better trained and therefore better retained workers into the workforce when they're trying to, when so many, especially in the manufacturing industry, are trying to get people to come in the door and be employees there. And I wanted to see what you thought about that, Rob, but just so folks know, this was passed unanimously in the state house, 93-0, a rare thing for a new bill and a new credit in the North Dakota state legislature.
First of all, I can't really say anything against it. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it might be, I think my one criticism, if you want to call it that, is I think it might be beside the point of the problems that are facing us right now. I mean, our problem in North Dakota is not jobs. It's not the availability of jobs. Our problem is the availability of people to fill the jobs. And so I'm wondering if giving a tax credit to employer to try to create opportunities is the way we want to go. I think, honestly, we should be looking at the other side of the equation, is what can we do for workers to get them to either stay here in North Dakota and take jobs or get them to come here to North Dakota and take jobs. This seems like we're working on the wrong side of the equation, I guess, is my argument.
And I think it's a really interesting point.
Who introduced the bill?
That was prime sponsored by Representative Boucher with, let me find that while we're talking.
If it passed 93-0, I guess it was pretty bipartisan.
Yeah, he's got Republican reps and senators on that, and other Republican.
No, it's not
Democratic.
I don't want to criticize her. I mean, I think his heart's in the right place. I'm just wondering in this moment of time. This moment of time.
Well, just briefly, he has Representative Bosch, Finley, Devil, Haggart, Ista. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Senator Ken from Grand Forks. I really apologize.
Kaninen.
Representative Nathy, Patton, Pepcorn, Ruminal, Schreiberbeck, Steiner. So I mean, when you got Josh Boucher and Vicky Steiner agreeing on the need for a bill, you might as well just sign it.
I don't think it hurts. I just think that we ought to be working on the other side of the equation. We need people to come in. What can we do to move people into North Dakota?
I feel like there's a lot of maybe unpaid internships or potentials for them that this might allow payment for, that might attract people into those jobs faster. So it might be working on the other side of that. And I want to talk about 1382, which got a 12-2 due pass recommendation in the House Education Committee. That is a pre-existing $500 what is called North Dakota Scholarship. I'm giving air finger quotes, which is a great thing to do in an audio medium, that allows students to get reimbursed for taking scholarships or apprenticeship jobs while still in high school. So trying to get them into the trades industry. I would love to hear how successful that's been, but it was set to sunset in 2024, and now it will not sunset until 2030 at a credit of $500 per student. Honestly, I gotta think that's just a teeny tiny drop in the state's budget bucket, that I think if it encourages any kids to even explore the trades industry or get some experience in it, I gotta think that's worth it. I gotta think that's a positive. And so when we talk about workforce needs, we sometimes don't talk about these frankly unsexy bills that are directly addressing them. I think it's worth talking about them, and worth talking about your points and your doubts with them too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they hurt. I don't think they hurt at all. You know, I think it's all, and it's I think the real difficulty with policy like this is it's always difficult, I think, to measure the efficacy. I'd be interested to know how many people took the scholarship, for instance. You know, and
I'd absolutely like to hear that.
You know, did we really change heads, or did we just make it $500 cheaper for people who were already going to do this? I mean, if we're not bringing new people in, right? If we didn't increase the number of people who are going into this, then what did we accomplish, right?
I think it's a question you have to ask with every piece of legislation, but when you're talking about people that are trying to get apprenticeships to go into the trades when they're still in high school, those usually aren't folks that are coming from millionaire households, to stereotype a bit, but they're usually blue collar families coming from a blue collar background. That $500 probably is going to mean a lot to a 17-year-old.
I don't doubt it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not turning up my nose at $500, but did we change behavior? Because I mean, the goal of the bill is to address, again, we're trying to address workforce shortages. We're trying to get more people on the job. Did we change behavior? Did we really attract more people in, or did we just help out the people and maybe helping out the people who are already on that track? Maybe that's fine. But to me, what I'm really interested in is how do we get people to come to North Dakota? How do we, to get an education to fill some of these jobs? That's what we got to be focused on. I think laser focused. And sometimes some of this stuff I think gets a little nebulous when it comes to achieving that end. Does that make sense? And again, this sounds like I'm running these bills into the ground. I'm trying not to. I'm just saying maybe we could be more focused than this.
But you're providing a counterpoint. That's important. I'd say with these bills, I'd absolutely desperately plead with the legislature to walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to the focus on bringing folks in. And I really do wonder if, that 17, 18, 19-year-old looking at these, if they can only get an unpaid internship welding or somewhere else versus working $15 to $20 an hour at Qdoba. Again, by the way, I've mentioned those service jobs multiple times. I would like to mention, I'm not trying to trash you going to Buffalo Wild Wings and earning $15 to $20 an hour being a server. That's a job. Somebody's got to do it, and now they're getting paid well. Good.
I worked retail. I mean, I started working in the 4th grade, delivering the Minot Daily News, 120 copies of the Minot Daily News, 7 days a week at 4:30 in the morning. I started in the 4th grade is when I started my paper out, and I did it all through high school. And then in the summer, I washed cars. I detailed cars. My brother-in-law had an auto detail shop. I've worked retail, and I worked in the call center. I did tech support while I was in high school for Disney games and Gateway Computers. Remember the old cow?
Game. And the cow box. My first job was at Fleet Farm, so there was no disrespect. I ran the till there and stacked the bottles on in-house wares.
Careers are a ladder, and I think sometimes we get a little too cute in thinking, well, I've got to do all this education and then I'm going to immediately jump in the middle of the ladder, at the top rungs of the ladder, and it just doesn't work that way. Work's a ladder, and one of the best ways to move up that ladder is work. Education too, don't get me wrong.
But that welding job, that trade career, that can be that can be the ladder to a career job that maybe some in the service industry don't view as a long-term job. Again, there are managers in the service industry. I'm not discounting that, but this bill, I think, is encouraging that, and I think it's an effective way of doing that. And I'm glad we have legislators that are keeping their eye on the ball, addressing these issues and not just chasing, I guess for whatever reason, I feel the need to highlight the non-hot button social issue bills that just, I think are an utter waste of time.
And we got to wrap things up, but I think it's good to attack some of the cynicism we have. I mean, listen, our elected officials give us a lot of reasons at times to be cynical about this process. I think the problem is if we get not all of them, you're right. And if we get to a point where we're lumping them all into the same category all the time, it's so fashionable to say, oh, all the politicians lie. They're all corrupt. I mean, you hear people say that all the time, and it's not true. There are a lot of good public servants, a lot of good elected officials who are trying their best to do the right thing. You may not necessarily agree with everything that they're doing, but their heart's in the right place, and they are trying, and it's important to remember that. It's important even for someone like me to remember that, because it's easy, I think, to focus on the stuff that just depresses you and to forget about the stuff that really is important and really matters. I mean, someone's keeping the highways going, right? Someone's keeping the DMV open. All these things that we have to have. There are people that are doing their jobs, and that's important to remember.
we have roads and we have schools for a reason. We have, there's a military out there, and not saying they do the work, but they do pass the bills that set up the structure to get the funding going. And everyone's a piece of the cog, like you said. And if every government official was only a greedy bureaucrat out for themselves, we'd literally not have any of that. So I
what I was
completely
trying to
agree with you. And
I enjoy your move to bring in some of these the good news bills. Like, hey, here's something positive that we're moving in the right direction on. I think that's a good thing. But we got to end this show. We'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Ben. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.